Welcome to the layer-by-layer overview of Psalm 34. A way to remember this psalm is with the phrase, taste and see. This phrase is only found in Psalm 34. It invites people to experience God's goodness. And it reminds us of one particular time when David himself tasted and saw just how good God is. Psalm 34 is an alphabetic acrostic. This means that it is a kind of poem where each line begins with a different letter of the alphabet in order. Poems like this, which have a strict formal structure, often have a less formal internal structure. This often leads to discussing an idea from many different perspectives, one after another, rather than moving from topic to topic. In this psalm, the first half focuses on testimony. David's testimony, his story of how the Lord rescued him from recent danger, and then a more general testimony of those who fear the Lord. In the second half, David teaches others. He starts with announcing his teaching, and then he passes on what he learned to others who also need to hear about God's goodness. The testimony, David's story about how the Lord rescued him, starts with an exciting tone. The excitement here makes it seem like we are watching the Lord rescue David. The second part shifts to an insistent tone. David insists that the story of what happened to him is not just his own story. It is also the story of all who fear the Lord. The teaching section becomes quieter as David becomes serious. He wants his audience to listen closely and believe what he says. As he teaches these lessons, David himself is confident. He knows the truth about how the Lord treats his own people, and he wants his audience to be confident about this truth as well. Superscription. By David, when he pretended to be insane before Abimelech, and Abimelech drove him out, and he went. The superscription to Psalm 34 is more detailed than many of the superscriptions in the Psalms. It refers to the story in 1 Samuel 21:11 to 22:1, in which David runs away from Saul and tries to hide in the Philistine city of Gath. The servants of the king of Gath recognize David and tell the king. Then David is arrested, as we learn from Psalm 56. David is very afraid, so he pretends to be insane before the king. In response, the king sends David away, and David is able to leave in safety. He then hides in the cave of Adullam. David's family and 400 troubled people join him there. These were people who were in debt or in some trouble with the ruling authorities. There, in this cave, and most likely with this audience of troubled people, is the most likely place David first told his story and started to teach about the Lord. The superscription that tells us this includes the first lesson. Instead of the king of Gath's given name, Achish, as we read in 1 Samuel, the psalm uses the likely throne name, Abimelech. See our exegetical issues and poetic features videos for more information. The testimony section begins the acrostic poem with the first letter of the Hebrew alphabet, Aleph. This section begins with a personal testimony, David's own story, and then expands to a more general testimony, a story that is true for all people who fear the Lord. See the Poetic Features video for the artistry involved with the alphabetic acrostic, particularly in this verse. I will bless the Lord at all times. His praise will continually be in my mouth. David just escaped serious danger in Gath, and his response is to praise the Lord. David blesses him, which means that David is saying that the Lord is the one who has special power. It is the power of the Lord that just delivered him, and David praises him for it. In addition to blessing the Lord and praising him, David insists that he will do this at all times. This may be hyperbole, a type of literary exaggeration showing David's excitement about what God has done. Or more likely, David is saying that he will bless and praise the Lord in all circumstances. Every situation, including dangerous ones, like the one David just escaped, is actually an opportunity to praise the Lord. This is part of David's theme. No time or situation is beyond the Lord's protection and provision. At all times, there is reason to praise the Lord. My soul boasts in the Lord. May the afflicted hear and be glad. This verse starts with the second letter of the Hebrew alphabet, Bet. The Hebrew word translated boasts sounds very similar to the word translated act insane, which appears in 1 Samuel 21:14. The word here for boasts is tithalel, and the one for act insane is yitholel. Our Poetic Features video has more information about how several parts of this psalm are connected to the background story. These connections show how God can take a serious problem and turn it into a reason for boasting. That is, for being proud and happy about God's deliverance. The Hebrew word order also highlights this. The words "in the Lord" are in focus, which in English would be like saying, "It is in the Lord alone that my soul boasts." This is why the afflicted, people who are in trouble or going through hard times, may hear and be glad. God turns affliction, serious problems and suffering, even pretended insanity, into a cause for boasting. Extol the Lord with me, and let us exalt his name together. Verse 4 begins with the third letter of the Hebrew alphabet, Gimel. The boasting and being glad now have a specific focus: to extol the Lord and to exalt his name. Extol is another word for praise. It means to talk about how great the Lord is. Exalt has a similar meaning and has to do with lifting something up, making it higher. Here, both words mean praising the Lord in order to tell everyone how powerful he is and how high he is above all others. This is the order of David's testimony. He starts by telling about the time when he was delivered. Next, he talks about being joyful because of that deliverance. Finally, he invites others to praise the Lord with him. I sought the Lord, and he answered me, and he rescued me from all my terrors. The fourth letter in the Hebrew alphabet is Dalet, which we see at the beginning of verse 5. With this verse, David explains the situation that is the reason for his praise. He sought or prayed to the Lord answered, and the Lord rescued him. In 1 Samuel 21:13, David realized that running away to Gath was a bad idea that might end in his death. He became greatly afraid of Achish, king of Gath. If this verse in Psalm 34 is a reference to that specific time, then David is saying here that the Lord gave him the idea and the ability to pretend to be insane before the king. According to the narrative in 1 Samuel 21, the king was so disgusted that he released David. According to the poem here in Psalm 34, it was the Lord who rescued David from all his terrors. The psalm shows us that the Lord was using the king's actions to save David. Gaze at him and glow, and do not let your faces be ashamed. Verse 6 starts with the fifth letter of the Hebrew alphabet, He. In this verse, David tells his audience that they should listen to the story about David's danger and rescue, so that they too can gaze upon or look at the Lord, the rescuer, and then glow because they are so happy about his rescue. The people David is talking to have many problems, but if they look upon the Lord, they can be filled with joy. If they follow David's teaching, they will not be disappointed in the outcome. When David says, "Do not let your faces be ashamed," he reminds the people who are listening that if they look somewhere else that is not the Lord, this will cause disappointment and shame. But if they look to the Lord alone, there will be no shame. This is a poor man who called out, and the Lord heard and saved him from all his troubles. With this verse, David ends the first half of the testimony. This is my story. He is also saying that it can be your story too if you listen to me. If the Lord saved me, then he can save you too, if you will only call out to him as I did. The second half of the testimony starts in verse 8. David changes from his own personal testimony to talking about the more general experience of those who fear the Lord. The Lord's angel encamps all around those who fear him, and he delivers them. Because this psalm is talking about times when people are experiencing trouble, the context of verse 8 includes, whenever the Lord's people are surrounded by enemies, his angel stays close to those who fear him, to guard them on every side. When those enemies try to attack, the Lord delivers those who fear him, so that they are safe from all harm. Taste and see that the Lord is good. Happy is the man who takes refuge in him. This verse is where we find the phrase that helps us remember this psalm. Taste and see. It means discover for yourself. Everyone who fears the Lord has learned that he sends his angel to deliver them when they need to be saved. This verse is teaching that you too, O troubled audience, can experience this God. The superscription, the title phrase at the beginning of the psalm, included the phrase, when he pretended to be insane, which literally means, in Hebrew, when he changed his discernment, or when he changed or covered up his ability to understand and make good decisions about people and situations. That Hebrew word for discernment is almost the same as this word, taste, here in verse 9. These similar words show a close connection to the story in 1 Samuel 21. In that story, David had to change his taste or discernment to escape from Gath. But now he can use his senses properly to experience God's goodness. He tries to persuade those around him to do the same. Our Poetic Features video explains these connections in more detail. Happy is the man is a common Hebrew phrase that communicates that people respect or approve of someone. The first verse of Psalm 1 is another good example. The purpose of all of the verses in the testimony section of Psalm 34 is to show that fearing the Lord is a very good thing. They show how the Lord is the one who saves people out of their problems and troubles. The people the Lord saves are called happy, which means here that they are respected and successful. David includes this phrase in verse 9 because he wants people to be eager to hear what he's going to say when he starts teaching them directly in verse 10. He wants his learners to be curious to learn more about how to become happy in this way. Fear the Lord, you holy ones of his, for those who fear him have no lack. While verses 8 and 9 talk about the kind of situations where someone needs to be delivered or otherwise might die, Verses 10 and 11 talk about all kinds of needs. In 1 Samuel 22, verse 2, we see that the people with David were in distress, in debt, or with some other desperate need. The same answer is offered for everyone. Fear the Lord, all you who belong to him. The reason to fear him is simple. People who fear him lack nothing. He provides for all their needs. This is not a proverb that means that those who fear the Lord will never experience need. Instead, it is a claim that when people who fear the Lord experience needs, he will always provide for them. People often rejoice after they have a need and have seen how the Lord provides for their need. Young lions have suffered want and been hungry, but those who seek the Lord will not lack any good. Lions are fierce hunters, so they are not often hungry or hungry for very long. In fact, lions sometimes represent proud and wicked leaders who harm their people rather than caring for them. Here in verse 11, we see that young lions, even though they are strong and fully capable of hunting, sometimes go hungry. This is different from those who fear the Lord, those who depend on him for provision. These people will always be provided for. With this image of lions, David is saying that having needs is not the problem itself. It is not a problem that young lions become hungry and need food. The problem is whether or not their parents can provide for them, or whether they can provide for themselves. For the 400 people in trouble who have come around David, the problem is not that they have needs. The problem is whether or not they will look to someone who can provide for them. Exactly how to do that, how to look to the Lord for provision, is the topic of the second half of the psalm. This section, like the first, has two parts. The first part talks about teaching, and the second part discusses how the Lord provides for the righteous in a way he does not provide for the wicked. Come, children, listen to me. I will teach you the fear of the Lord. Direct address is a grammar term that describes a word or phrase where an author speaks directly to the audience. This often happens at the beginning of a new section, like it does here in verse 12. The address to children here is how a teacher would talk to students or pupils. The family term shows that the teacher cares about the students and wants them to succeed. The word teach, which is lamad in Hebrew, sounds very similar to the Hebrew letter lamed, which is the first letter of this verse. The emotional feeling in this verse is positive, but it becomes less active and calms down to prepare for the serious teaching that is coming. Those who fear the Lord are the people he gives help to and provides for. Now David teaches his audience how to become one of those people. That is, he teaches them what it means to fear the Lord. Who is the person who desires life, who wants to live a long time, who loves to see good? Verse 13 is a rhetorical question, which is a type of question that makes a statement rather than actually asking a question. David uses this rhetorical question to get his audience's attention. He is saying he will tell them the secret to life, how to have a long, happy life full of good things. In every period of history, there are people who pretend to have an answer to every problem. These people are successful because people do want long life and good things. David speaks about this desire to get people's attention for what comes next. With everyone's attention, David gives his wisdom. If you want a long life, then you must Keep your tongue from evil and your lips from speaking deceit. The words that a person says show what is inside of that person. When this verse says not to say evil or deceitful things, it means do not say or do anything that is against God's law. Just as in Psalm 1, verse 1, we see here in Psalm 34 that biblical teaching often starts by telling people the negative things they should not do before telling them the positive things that they should do. Turn away from evil and do good. Seek peace and pursue it. The Hebrew word for evil here includes anything that can be observed or evaluated as bad. It certainly includes all that is morally wrong and harmful, but it also includes the bad of any kind. David urges his audience to turn away from anything and everything that is bad, and instead to pursue, to follow and go in the direction of what is good. David's teaching is simple, and we can compare what he says to the action of tasting, which we saw earlier in the psalm. In many cases, people already know what is good and what is bad. When they take the time to think about it, they can often taste for themselves. Their responsibility is to respond to what they taste. They should turn away from evil and turn toward what is good. The word for peace in Hebrew is a word that includes everything that is good in life. It is not something a person gets easily without trying. People must actively look for and pursue it. With this summary statement in verse 15, David finishes announcing his topic for teaching, the fear of the Lord. In the next verses, he moves on to a new subsection, which focuses on how the Lord protects and provides for the righteous in a way he does not care for the wicked. The subsection begins and ends with this contrast between the righteous and the wicked. This suggests to David's audience that they have two choices. Will they choose to join the people who fear the Lord, or those who do evil? David uses many rhetorical devices to help persuade people regarding which option they should choose. The order of the Hebrew alphabet seems to have been slightly different in David's day compared with later, when the Psalms were finally collected into one book. For David, the letter Pe would have come before the letter Ayin. If we follow that ordering, verse 17 actually comes before verse 16. This order helps to solve some difficulties in the text as well, as we'll see in a moment. Our exegetical issues video explains the details. And now, the text of verse 17. The Lord's face is against those who do evil, so as to remove the memory of them from the earth. This verse tells us what happens to those who do not fear the Lord. A person was remembered after his death, either because he had children who remembered him, or because people continued to speak about his life. In this way, a person could receive honor even after dying. To have all memory removed means that a person has no honor in this life and no honor after dying. This is what happens to those who do not fear the Lord. In verse 16, the Lord's eyes are directed towards the righteous, and his ears are attentive to their cries for help. What happens to righteous people is very different from what happens to wicked people. Both groups of people will find themselves in need, but whereas the wicked will be removed, losing any status or honor, the righteous will receive God's compassion. He is actively paying attention to them in order to care for them. Just as the afflicted, the people who are in trouble, were told to gaze at the Lord to experience his care, In verse 6, so too, the Lord himself has his eyes directed toward the righteous. He is looking at them in order to provide them care. Verse 18 has the same order of events that we saw earlier in the psalm in verse 5 and verse 7. First, one person or a group of people calls for help. Then the Lord hears and delivers them. This order is repeated here as part of what David is teaching based on his own experience. When the righteous experience trouble, the same thing always happens. They called for help, and the Lord heard, and he delivered them from all their troubles. This is easy to understand with verse 16 coming right before it. The righteous cried for help, and the Lord heard, because he always listens to cries for help from the righteous. For all the people in David's audience who had many problems, it would be comforting to hear that the Lord would deliver them if they turned to him. But they might still have questions such as, what now? I'm broken-hearted and hurting now. Where is his provision right now? David knows what this is like, so he says, the Lord is near to the broken-hearted, and he saves the crushed in spirit. As David has learned, wisdom does not mean that a wise person will never feel sad, never be broken-hearted or crushed in spirit. All people will feel like this sometimes. A wise person is someone who prays to God even in the middle of hard times, because he knows that the Lord is listening and will respond. When this verse says that the Lord is near, this means that he is able to help and ready to hear his people when they call out. The hardships of the righteous are many, but the Lord rescues him from all of them. This verse tells us plainly that David's teaching in this psalm is for people who are experiencing pain, suffering, and sadness. Whether during times of hardship or during times of happiness, how God acts remains the same. The righteous, those who will turn from evil and do good, will be rescued. He protects all his bones. Not one of them has broken. The breaking of bones was a phrase used to talk about punishment from God. There is a difference between hardship, that is, times of pain and suffering that happen to everyone, and divine punishment, the kind of pain and suffering that is a punishment from God. The righteous will experience hardship, but they will not experience divine punishment. They will be protected from divine punishment every time. Hardship finishes off a wicked person, and those who hate a righteous person bear their guilt. The word translated finish off is not used very often in the Bible. It refers to the death blow, that is, the final act that kills someone. Although hardship will come to all, it will not be the final act to kill the righteous. They will be rescued before that happens. Hardship will finish off or kill the wicked, however. God's divine punishment is reserved for the wicked. The wicked here are defined as those who hate the righteous. They will bear their guilt, meaning they will be judged as guilty, and they will not be forgiven. This means that they will receive punishment from God. They will not be delivered. The Lord redeems his servants' lives, and no one who seeks refuge in him will ever bear guilt. In verse 23, we see the way that hardship, wickedness, righteousness, and guilt are all connected. hardship will come to both the righteous and the wicked, because everyone becomes guilty of sin and experiences trouble as part of the result. Hardship comes to both the wicked and the righteous. This is a powerful message for the 400 afflicted people around David. What matters is not whether or not they experience hardship, but whether they seek refuge in God during their times of pain and suffering. For those who seek refuge in God, that is, those who look to Him for protection, He will redeem their lives. He will save them. They will belong to the Lord and will not bear their guilt. The wicked, by contrast, will not be redeemed, and they will bear their guilt. The first half of this psalm is usually categorized as a thanksgiving. However, we have seen how praising the Lord and telling a story about His deliverance helps to accomplish a larger goal. It encourages the afflicted to trust in the Lord. The psalm is not addressed to the Lord in thanksgiving, but to the people in exhortation. It is telling people how they should act. The second half of the psalm clearly states what it is doing, teaching the fear of the Lord. To teach here means to cause humans to acquire knowledge, skill, or behavior to the point of doing. David uses all his skill to not simply share knowledge, but to urge his audience to live according to such knowledge. Both halves of the psalm, therefore, have the same goal, that others would come to fear the Lord and experience His provision and protection. The first half of the psalm seeks to accomplish this goal by telling David's personal testimony, his story of how the Lord delivered him, along with exhortations telling people to trust in the Lord. The second half of the psalm seeks to accomplish this goal by a lesson that shows what it means to fear the Lord. The purpose of this lesson is understanding that leads to doing. To say it another way, the first half of the psalm focuses on affecting the audience's emotions, while the second half focuses on convincing the audience's mind. Both halves of the psalm are trying to influence the will so that the reader or hearer might respond by fearing the Lord, and as a result, experience the Lord's provision and protection. We will now read the entire psalm. By David, when he pretended to be insane before Abimelech, and Abimelech drove him out, and he went. I will bless the Lord at all times. His praise will continually be in my mouth. My soul boasts in the Lord. May the afflicted hear and be glad. Extol the Lord with me, and let us exalt His name together. I sought the Lord, and He answered me, and He rescued me from all my terrors. Gaze at Him and glow. Do not let your faces be ashamed. This is a poor man who called out, and the Lord heard and saved him from all his troubles. The Lord's angel encamps all around those who fear Him, and He delivers them. Taste and see that the Lord is good. Happy is the man who seeks refuge in Him. Fear the Lord, you holy ones of His, for those who fear Him have no lack. Young lions have suffered want and been hungry, but those who seek the Lord will not lack any good. Come, children, listen to me. I will teach you the fear of the Lord. Who is the person who desires life, who wants to live a long time, who loves to see good? Keep your tongue from evil and your lips from speaking deceit. Turn away from evil and do good. Seek peace and pursue it. The Lord's face is against those who do evil, so as to remove the memory of them from the earth. The Lord's eyes are directed towards the righteous, and his ears are attentive to their cries for help. They called for help, and the Lord heard, and he delivered them from all their troubles. The Lord is near to the brokenhearted, and he saves the crushed in spirit. The hardships of the righteous are many, but the Lord rescues him from all of them. He protects all his bones. Not one of them has broken. Hardship finishes off a wicked person, and those who hate a righteous person bear their guilt. The Lord redeems his servants' lives, and no one who seeks refuge in him will ever bear guilt. This has been the overview video for Psalm 34. Our goal in this video is to present a single coherent interpretation of the psalm. Our exegetical issues video discusses other scholarly views, and our poetic features video explores the distinctively poetic nature of the psalm as Hebrew poetry. Please visit us at psalms.cdbr.org to learn more. Thank you.